I'm Leanne Tran, psychologist who's worked with families whose kids don't fit the mould for almost 20 years. I've worked with children for decades, but I know parents are the real change makers when it comes to their kids. Having 3 kids of my own means I know it's not easy. Parent Like a Psychologist is all about simplifying how you support your kids with psychology information filtered through years of experience to take you from overwhelmed to confident. Come on in.
I wondered about whether you think there are, it sounds like you are a fairly neurodivergent family because you're talking about all people in the family.
Yeah,
Do you think there are common misconceptions people have about what being neurodivergent means, and particularly for neurodivergent kids?
I definitely struggle, I think, still seeing a lot of the misinformation around like, oh, it's a dietary change or it's a parasite cleanse that you need to do. And, I've done other interviews where people have, lovingly and I guess unknowingly brought up the vaccine conversation. Obviously, all that type of stuff it's quite annoying to have to constantly reiterate yourself and explain, I guess, what autism actually is. And
Yeah,
you already need to look at our families, look at myself, look at families on both sides. And I mean, I hyperfixated on the family history one day and traced everything back to the 1600s. And
right.
to me, they were lining up buttons and had interesting collections of animal bones right up in the
Okay.
family, right back that far. So
Yeah,
it's so blatantly obvious to me what it actually looks like. And so to see a bit of that misinformation and ignorance out there it's quite sad, but I also have to remember that I'm advocating for my kids' experience. I'm advocating for my experience. And do I have time to fix the whole world? Thoughts on this? Probably not. So it's
no.
like understanding what I have the capacity to influence and what I don't.
Yeah. And I think you've got enough work to do to support, well, all parents with neurodivergent kids, supporting them is enough rather than also having to educate the rest of the world.
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
that's probably one of the other things is that I see there's a very, I guess, common format. And even though I'm not super involved in like the autism mums community, I do feel like there is a common format of, kids getting diagnosis and one of the parents like abandoning their entire identity, job, life, career, hobbies to become the support person for their autistic kids. And there's obviously varying levels of support. But I think that there needs to be different models of what being that supportive parent can look like
Mm,
for your kids who have gone through diagnosis. That might mean you want to quit your job and, get rid of every artificial dye color that enters your home and be there 24/7 on support to nurture their needs. But it also might look like having a nanny take the kids to therapy appointments. It also might look like thriving in your career so that you can pay enough money for the vitamins that your children need because of feeding therapy. There just needs
yeah.
to be, I think, more what am I trying to communicate here? Not transparency, but more different options for people to
Yeah.
see as available
Yeah.
for them.
So maybe it's more representation of the different
That's the
ways of,
word. Yep.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, I love that idea because you definitely have not given up your career to look after your kids. You've kind of
I,
doubled down, 3
I would go
businesses, right?
insane. I would
Yeah,
go absolutely. I would throw like 2 of mine currently, and my husband's is the third, which is really it's
yeah,
yeah, at one point I was running 3 by myself and he was working full time. So it's a lot, but I think I would never want my kids to see that the version of a mother is just one that gives their entire identity to the kids. I just believe that's not healthy for me to model for them either. I want them to know what it looks like to chase after your own dreams and have your own hobbies and things that fill you up. And yeah,
yeah,
that's important as well, I feel.
yeah. And so, are there strategies you use to manage the day-to-day challenges of family? And this is, you don't need to give the
Yeah.
nice, neat little principle
Yeah.
or app.
Yeah. Like I mentioned before, our life is pretty chaotic. And we have a very, I guess, high demands lifestyle. I guess that's probably the best way to explain it. And there's definitely been times over the years where I've not managed it very well. I nearly had like a full mental breakdown after like a third NDIS review and our funding getting cut by 60% a few years ago. And that was quite intense. I was handling all the therapy appointments myself and basically just everything myself while running two companies. That conversation led to my husband actually leaving his job and coming to be a stay-at-home dad and managing a lot of the therapy appointments with me. That lasted about 2 weeks until he started his business as well, because apparently we have zero chill. So then the past 2 years, there's been a really, really great balance of both doing lots of therapy appointments, both handling all the stuff at home. We've had a really, really great kind of flexibility in our lifestyle, and that's allowed for me to do a lot of, I guess, healing in myself. Figuring out how I work best is actually having less time with the kids in the morning, going for a walk, exercising, having a bit of a slower start. And then I'm a much better mum and able to help them regulate more in the afternoons, whereas my husband's the opposite. So that works really well. But we've had to go through these different phases. And I think it is just understanding that what might have worked 3 months ago for our family may not work now. What might have worked when my daughter was doing cheerleading practice and I was doing 6 hours of driving a week to cheerleading now looks very different to what needs to work when we're off cheerleading season. So it's like just constantly going, where are we adjusting? How much mental load are you holding? How much am I holding between my partner and I, my husband and I? What do our calendars look like? Where do we need extra support? And then also prioritizing as well and going, what is the most important therapies for the kids right now? What could technically be dropped if we needed to? What's the most important focus that we've got for each child right now in terms of the goals that they're working towards? And just constantly kind of looking and reevaluating that. Is that the information you were hoping for with that?
Absolutely. As you were talking, I was thinking about how, sometimes we feel like if we don't have the one piece of advice or like a rule to follow, we're not really giving advice. But I think any advice that starts with "it depends" is probably the best advice to follow, and it does really change, I think, depending on what season of life you're in, how old your kids are, but also what is the most prominent need at the time. And the advice I often give to parents when they're thinking about that too is to think about what's the big priority for, like you mentioned, for therapies. What's having the big impact for your child, but also for you as a family? That's the priority. Sometimes trying to do it all means that the stress levels are too high for everybody, and that ends up being nobody's better off. So yeah, really got to think about what your capacity is as a unit.
Absolutely.
And
yeah, we have a lot of conversations about capacity as a family. Like, that's a word the kids are very familiar with. Mummy does not have capacity for that right now. Mummy does not have emotional bandwidth for that right now.
Right.
But whatever it is, it comes, like I think as well, I'm really big on tracking and recognizing that there are patterns and how can I preempt this next time so it doesn't necessarily have to be so big and so traumatic. My daughter's meltdowns could be incredibly violent and destructive prior to some medication. And obviously that was affecting a lot of things. So it really came down to tracking her moods, figuring out what was going on. Was there certain times that things made worse? It was always happening on a Friday afternoon after school, or if there was a big event at school, and then, grandparents might pop in, and how these little things stacked up that led to a big situation. For myself, I also have premenstrual dysphoric disorder, which I always struggle to say. And so tracking that for 9 months, I was able to go to my doctor, say, this is what's going on. And I was in to have a hysterectomy 6 weeks later, life-changing. But I could only do that when I had the information to prove this is how my moods fluctuate, this is how my attitude fluctuates. And it's the same for my kids. If things are blowing up at a certain time all the time, what do I either need to change in our schedule to reduce that, or what do I need to put in place before that to make that transition easier? For example, the Friday afternoon thing always blowing up. It was like, okay, so we don't do play dates on Friday afternoons. I pick you straight up. There's no walking home. Like, I'm straight up picking you at 3:30. You have your medication, you have a snack, you go in your room quietly, and the whole thing's avoided. But if I wasn't paying attention to the pattern, I would never know that.
Yeah. That's such good advice. And how I'm interested, I keep asking you how questions, I know, which is tricky. Do you use a diary for that, or is it just in your beautiful brain that you're able to keep track of patterns? Because I don't have that skill.
Yeah, I have a few different tracking things that I use. I've got obviously like a big, one of my offers in my business is a 90-day tracking thing. So I'm very much on
Hmm.
tracking for business. And that's, I think, when I actually used the business tracker to realize I was having that premenstrual dysphoric disorder, because there
Right.
was this block every single month where I wasn't making any money for 3 or 4 days.
Okay.
What is going on here? It's not even on my cycle time normally. Did a bit of looking into it, asked some family members, and we figured out what the problem was. For my daughter, she has a mood tracker that she's created with her therapist, and
Right.
she, fills that in as she needs. For myself, I use I think it's a habit tracker app, which tracks my mood. And then I use
Yeah.
a health tracking app, which kind of tells me like if I'm really grumpy and being a horrible person, I've only been getting 4 hours sleep for the last 4 nights. It's kind of more of like I still need to take responsibility for the way that I'm behaving, but I can see the reason why so I can fix it. It's not just
Yeah.
an awful human being. And
Yep.
then for the other kids, if there's any really big meltdowns, I just kind of make a note of it in my paper diary that we've had a bit of a situation here, and then kind of just take some time to look back over things and
Yeah.
figure out where it's going wrong.
Yep.
Yeah, I think my husband and I are very good at picking up the patterns quite quickly and
Hmm.
intuitively these days. Something will kind of
Yeah.
set one of the kids off, and we'll be like, wait a minute, and go back and just have a think about the calendar and be like, oh, yeah, we hit this same point last month after too many days of swimming in a row, or we've hit the same point over the
Yeah.
like school holidays. It's the same thing over and over again. So I guess that's one point where the pattern recognition really helps.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. Um, that's all, yeah, really great advice and practical as well. I think it doesn't really matter how you're tracking it, but it's having that information available and at the ready.
Yeah, yeah. And it's I think that level of just awareness with it is really
Yeah.
vital. Yeah.
Yep. And so what you've talked a lot about the experiences and some of the challenges that you have as a family, but also the ways that you help your kids and yourself and be able to then be, doing lots of stuff and living a really full, engaged life. Um, is there advice that you would give to somebody earlier on in this journey? Maybe it's thinking about looking back 10 years ago to yourself, what advice you would give?
Yeah, there was definitely a point in my life where I could barely leave the house with my kids. Eric, our oldest, his behavior was just so dangerous and unaware, that he would take off anywhere we were and just run and run and run. And I was pregnant, I couldn't catch up with him. His meltdowns were horrific. And yeah, being pregnant, I couldn't really help move him around the way that I would have previously. It got to a
Mm,
point where I was very much chained to the house unless we kind of had a 2 to 3 adult per child ratio for leaving the
right.
house. And I didn't get to do a lot of activities. And it took a lot in my own head to get over the judgment that I would potentially get. And I decided to get one of those little, like the leashes for kids.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
I felt awful. It was horrific. But I'm like, in that moment, it was the only way to keep my child safe while also getting food to feed him. Because I wasn't going to sit at home and let him
Mm,
starve. I still had to go and get groceries. I didn't have family support around me. And there was like, you couldn't keep him in the car. He would climb out of his car seat when we were going down the highway, even with all the Houdini straps. Like it got really, really stressful. And it just got to the point where I'm like, if I have to pull over 8 times, going from one spot to another to put him back in the car seat, if I have to, have 3 adults with me just to go grocery shopping at 8 o'clock at night, if I need to, if I have to put the leash on him, if I have to put headphones on, and if I have to pay for a ticket for an event and then leave halfway through, like it is what it is. And just, I
mhm.
think really being okay with your life looking different to how you expected. I think
Mhm.
there's that point when you get diagnosis, or you understand that it's going to be different when they drop the A bomb on you. And you
Yeah.
kind of look at your world and everything you kind of envisioned for your journey as a parent just disappears. It kind of like just disintegrates, like that Marvel movie where he snaps his fingers in front of you. And even though you're still going to have a parenting journey and nothing's technically changed, you're allowed to grieve and feel sad about the journey that you thought you would be on, and acknowledge that it is probably going to look different, and then that is okay too. And sometimes you can't see that far ahead in this journey. Sometimes you can only see right now, and you've just got to grieve and process that, but then get to a point where you're okay with it looking different, and then communicating that in a way where you're not trying to change people's minds. You're not trying to say, well, this is what's going on for our family and you need to adjust for it. Is just saying, I'm okay that we can't go to that event because I know it's not going to be worth it for anyone there. I'm not asking you to be okay with it. I'm not asking you to understand. I'm just communicating where we're at. And yeah, you can kind of get to that point. But I think that's what I would go back and tell myself, crying in the car, very pregnant on the way home from that appointment, that it is okay to grieve the parent you thought you would be and the children that you thought you would have. And you're going to create a future that's even better than you could have imagined or predicted anyway. But it's okay to grieve and feel sad about it. Yeah.
Yeah, that's really great advice. And I hear you saying too, to accept, or not accept, but I guess make peace with how things are at those moments in those hard times, while things are improving still at the same time as well. It's just knowing that you're not there yet, your child not there yet, you're just in that tricky time.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
As I read that phase, was it, I'm not sure. There's an Italian, it's like this too shall pass. And they say,
Okay.
but yeah, that's definitely, I think once your kids grow up and you start to see them all transition through the phases, you realize that, oh yeah, everything is a phase. Sometimes the hyperfixation topic might stay for a very, very, very long phase, a lifelong phase, but it's still like they move through phases, you move through phases as a parent, everything comes out the other side. Yeah.
Yeah. And like you said, there's new level, new devil. That's what they say in business, isn't it? And it's
Every
the
time. Yeah.
same is true for kids.
Yeah.
And
Like
their
more money, more
development.
problems, but yeah.
Yep. And because each phase they reach is new, everyone's got to adjust, and you do adjust, and then they develop some more, and you're back to square one. But
Yeah.
yeah, I
I think
like what
that's
you
a thing
said.
a hard thing
No,
for
that's okay.
when you're constantly doing like your NDIS goals every year type of stuff. And they're like, well, they've ticked that goal off, so you should need less funding now. And I'm like, okay, he's ticked that one goal off, but we got like 3 more that have popped up in 12 months. So we should talk about them
Yeah,
now. You know what I mean? I think there needs to have this shift in the way people perceive that. It's like, oh, well, he's talking now, so that problem's fixed. And it's like, oh, there's so much about communication that you don't understand. And just because we've achieved one goal, we've probably got 2 more. One thing has been
yeah.
solved, here's the next thing. Here's like, it's a constant evolution. It's not something that you can tick box your way out of.
No, and that's how children develop as well. Like all children are developing skills for their age and their stage, and neurodivergent kids are just the same. So they may be all right for a certain period of time in that stage, or they may have real trouble with that stage when they've been going okay before. So yeah, it's definitely not a one-time thing.
Yeah.
Mm,
And kind of this attitude of like, well, we'll get them to school, and then once they're in a mainstream school, it's fine. And then, well, once they're an adult, it's fine. And I'm like, trust me, I am an adult. I'm not fine. I still have so much stuff I need to sort out, so much stuff I need help with. Like just becoming an adult and going off or living on your own or whatever it is, that's not the definition of we've got it together. We know what we're doing. Absolutely not.
yep. And that's a really nice piece of advice to give all the parents out there. It's not like we're at this point where we've got it all together either.
Absolutely
Yeah.
not. A chronic mess, but make it work.
Yeah, you said the phrase thrive on the chaos before, so I'm imagining that's what it's like at your house.
Yeah, my friends have told me before that I'm half very wise oracle full of fantastic advice and half chaotic rave squirrel on too much cocaine. And I feel like that encompasses our life very well. There's these beautiful, calm moments where everyone's so emotionally connected and everyone's quite, and communicating very well. And then the next minute, everyone is just literally running around with music on in the background, having their own little moment it's insane, but
Yeah.
somehow it works for us. We wouldn't want it any other way.
Yeah, I love that about family, and I feel the same. It's chaos, but it's a beautiful chaos that I would not regret at all.
Yeah,
Yeah. Well, thank
absolutely.
you so much for joining me today. It's been really, really useful to hear your perspective and insights onto how things have worked for your family and for you as a parent as well. So I really appreciate you taking the time to um, have this conversation today.
Thank you. It's been fun, and it's kind of nice to look back over our journey and realize, even though we still have so far to go, how far we have come.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll link all of the information about you as well, because I don't know if there's any listeners who are in business. That 90-day planning sounds great, but also maybe can be applied to parenting, which is awesome.
Potentially, I never realized that I was using all these strategies to kind of manage my own ADHD, and I only got diagnosed 2 years ago. And
Hmm.
so it's really become, I was able to look back then and be like, how have I survived so long without understanding this about myself? And it was because I had all these little tools in place. And so now it's really excited to be able to, like, it's exciting to be able to share that with other people, and hopefully it
Mm.
works for them too.
Yeah, great. And thanks so much for sharing everything you have with us today.
Thanks for having the space for me.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Parent Like a Psychologist. If you found it helpful, please share on Instagram so other parents can benefit too, and tag me at Leanne Tran Psychology so that I can say a big thank you. Head over to leannetran.com.au to join the village for bite-sized psychology tips straight to your inbox. I really hope this podcast has brought a new perspective and you a step closer towards a calm parent and a thriving child. Have a delightful day.